Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers. We're back with another video. Let's jump to it.
Well, today I got something a little different for you. A few months ago I made a video titled Games I Gave Up On, in which I talked about some of the games I've played over the last few years that I ended up dropping for one reason or another. And a lot of people seem to really resonate with this video. Normally I talk about how many games I've beaten, how I finished an entire franchise or series of games, but throughout my entire life there have been a number of games that I've simply just given up on. For one reason or another, there's been tons of games throughout my life that I've started, sometimes even gotten pretty far through, that I eventually end up dropping. And so this video is basically a part 2. We're going to be talking about good games that I quit, good games that I gave up on, and I'll explain why for each game. But at the end of the day, I do believe all 10 of these games are good. But before we begin, let me know what games you've given up on in the past. What games have you quit? I would genuinely love to know. Let's get a discussion going. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks and memberships. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. So let's get to the games. So we're going to start with a more recent title, that being Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, I enjoyed the first Dragon's Dogma. I thought it was pretty different from what Capcom usually makes, and it was a unique action RPG. So when I saw that they were making a second one, I was fairly excited, and then I got it, and ended up playing a good 15 to 20 hours of it, but I never finished it. Why, you may ask? Well, there's a few reasons. First off, the story of Dragon's Dogma 2 just did not hit with me whatsoever. I didn't find it engaging, exciting, and even by the 15-hour mark, I was just feeling kind of indifferent about the whole thing. The world certainly is interesting, and there's absolutely potential here. It just failed to get me invested. I thought the story was kind of bland and lacking in big or memorable moments outside of the very beginning of the game. So the story failed to keep me going, but there's a few more reasons beyond that. While I think the gameplay overall is good and the combat can actually be pretty fun and satisfying, I was starting to get a bit tired of it. I can only fight the same looking enemies over and over and over with very little change for so long. Maybe I should have changed classes midway through or experimented some more with the combat, but it was just starting to feel a bit stale. There absolutely are some highlights here, like when you're climbing these giant beasts trying to take them out Shadow of the Colossus style, but even these started to grow old by a certain point. I feel like the game shows you all the tricks up its sleeve in the first like 5 hours, and then it doesn't really have all that much left. It doesn't really save all that much for later, and it all really just starts to blend together. Those first 5 to 10 hours, oh yeah, they're real exciting. There's a lot going on. They're introducing you to all this new stuff, and you're still learning all of the game's mechanics, but even by the second half, it all starts to feel a bit played out. Like, yeah, you're going to new areas and things are certainly happening in the story, but I found myself just kind of falling into autopilot, and it really felt like I was going through the motions, especially because I played the first Dragon's Dogma. Like, this game plays out very similarly to the first one, not only when it comes to the gameplay, but when it comes to the story and progression. The next thing I want to bring up is that a lot of the quests just weren't all that exciting, straight up. A lot of these were not hard-hitting, and a fair amount of them did feel generic. While the game has plenty of positives to it, like the detailed world and the awesome pawn system, I just found myself starting to struggle to continue this one, and if a game ever starts to feel like a chore, I pretty much drop it immediately. What certainly didn't help things was the game's performance either. When this game launched, the performance was pretty bad, and I actually dropped it a few hours in, but I came back and played quite a bit more of it, and the performance was a lot better. This is one of those titles where I think at some point I'm going to beat it. I already dropped it and came back to it and got way further, and I did get to the second half of the game, so it's not like I even got all that much left. I think if I come back to this one feeling refreshed, recharged, and everything starts to feel new again, but as things stand, it's currently a game I gave up on. So this next game honestly goes into my personal hall of shame, and that is BioShock 2. Now, a number of people have asked me to look at the BioShock games, rank the BioShock games, talk about them in some way, and I've never done it. You know why? Because I've never finished BioShock 2. It's true. Unfortunately, it's damn true. I've started BioShock 2 twice, and I've ended up dropping it twice. I remember the first time I played the game, it was right after I beat BioShock 1, and I went, man, this is kind of different from BioShock 1. I think I like BioShock 1 more, and I ended up dropping the game after just a few hours and going back and playing through BioShock 1 again. Then several years later I was like, I really should get around to Bioshock 2. Bioshock Infinite's out now and I've even played through that. And the second time I played it, I dropped it after about 3 hours for pretty similar reasons. I can't exactly explain why, but both times I played this game, I just didn't love playing as the Big Daddy. This big, slow, cumbersome beast just didn't feel all that fun to control, and I prefer how the original game feels. I also wasn't head over heels for the world of Bioshock 2. It kind of just felt like a rehash of the first one. Yeah, things were more dilapidated and it felt a lot more run down, but it just didn't have the same vibe or atmosphere as the first games. The tone was different, and it just didn't hit with me. It made the first game feel like lightning in a bottle by comparison. I wasn't loving the combat here either. Yeah, there are certainly more options here, but it feels incredibly similar to the first Bioshock, and the first Bioshock, as much as I love it, yeah, the combat does have some issues. And this just kind of felt like more of the same, only now you're bigger and slower. Speaking of being bigger and slower, I've just never really enjoyed those sequences where you have to defend the little sisters, where you have to hold out in an area for like 2 or 3 minutes. You gotta lay all these traps out, and then just an onslaught of enemies show up. Maybe as you play through the game this gets way better and the combat becomes a lot deeper and more enjoyable, but in the first few hours, yeah, I wasn't picking up what this game was putting down. I remember thinking overall that Bioshock 2 was just alright, but there were so many other games that I was playing at the time that I eventually dropped it. Nowadays I look back and I just frown. I'm like, how have I not played through Bioshock 2 at this point? It's even been remastered. At some point I'm going to play through Bioshock 2, and I think my opinion's going to change on this one, but as things are right now, it's a good game that I unfortunately dropped. So here's one that I'm sure will get people talking, and that is Hogwarts Legacy. Now this game obviously had a ton of hype behind it, and it sold like crazy. And I bought in on the hype as well. I got the game when it released, played like 5-6 hours of it, and then I ended up dropping it. And it's like, well, what the hell happened here? Don't you like Harry Potter? Yeah, I grew up with the movies and the books. I always loved them. I even love the Harry Potter areas at Universal, so why was I unable to get into this game? Well, there's a few reasons. I really had a hard time getting invested in this story, these characters, and the general plot line. It just came off as a bit bland and generally uninspired. None of these characters stood out to me, the plot just didn't really feel like it was going anywhere, and it felt like the game was more into just referencing other Harry Potter material rather than creating something wholly unique and of its own. It doesn't really have much of its own identity. At times, it felt more like nostalgia bait than anything else, and dare I say superficial, where they're just putting stuff in to be like, oh yeah, you remember that in Harry Potter, we know you like that, don't worry, we got it all for you, yeah. Maybe that's just a smoldering hot take, but what I'm trying to say is I really had a hard time feeling anything when it came to the story, and really that same sentiment can be applied to my entire experience with this game. Like the combat, you know, it seemed fine, maybe a little basic, but I just didn't find it all that fun or engaging. I was just kind of pressing 1 or 2 buttons and flashy things were happening. You could probably say that about a lot of games, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't clicking with the combat. The exploration actually seemed pretty decent and there was a number of interesting puzzles, but for whatever reason, I just didn't feel all that compelled to explore around in this game. The quests and missions seemed fine enough, but I didn't find myself yearning for the next quest. I didn't get overly excited. I wasn't totally intrigued and like, ooh, what's gonna happen next? I was just kind of like, okay, we got another mission. And then this game's interface, I opened it up and I went, oh, this is just Destiny's interface. This just looks like the most generic AAA interface imaginable. It was a lot better than Call of Duty's though, I will say that. And it was after a few hours of playing this game that I really just took a step back and went, you know, I'm not really feeling anything while playing this game. It just feels kind of soulless. I'm not entirely sure how else to describe it. There's been plenty of games I've played in the past where I didn't really feel anything, and sometimes I'll trudge through it, but with this one, for whatever reason, I just went, you know, I'm not really feeling it. This is another one that I would like to come back to in a few years and see if I'm feeling it then. It also came out in 2023, which was a really packed year, like one of the best years ever in gaming. And quite frankly, there were a lot of other games releasing that were a hell of a lot better than this. Oh yeah, and there was no Quidditch. Hated that. Overall though, the game was fine. And so our next one is a little bit sadder. It is the racing game Fuel. Now, if you don't remember this one, it came out in the late 2000s. It was actually developed by Asobo, the people who would go on to make the Plague Tale series, and it was even published by Codemasters. But even with these two big names, the game still ended up being a pretty underground racer, all things considered. It's a decent enough little arcade racer that takes place in the apocalypse, and it's easy racing through some pretty wild environments. The game was really touted for its massive open world, being one of the biggest to ever exist in a video game, and all these years later, it's still impressive how large this open world is. But I never finished this one, and you might be asking, well, why is that? There's really two reasons behind it. First off, while the open world is impressively big, shit, is this an empty open world. You can free roam, you can explore, but you will not find jack shit out here. There's really nothing here. A lot of big empty canyons and fields out here, and it just doesn't really feel like the game utilizes its open world very well. That and the game can actually get somewhat repetitive. It really is just race after race after race, similar looking environment to similar looking environment, despite how big the open world is, and I remember just wanting to take a break from it. The game can get pretty difficult thanks to some really bad rubber banding, and I remember after like 5 or 6 hours I just said, you know, I'll come back to this one later. I think I've had my fill with it for a little bit. But here's where the sad part comes in. I was playing this game on PC. I bought it off Steam, and even the Steam version used Games for Windows Live. If you remember Games for Windows Live, you remember how shitty of a DRM it was. And plenty of great games used Games for Windows Live. Dead Rising 2, GTA 4, Resident Evil 5, the list goes on, and Games for Windows Live was shutting down right when I was playing this game. Now, most games, an overwhelming majority of games that use Games for Windows Live got an update that allowed them to just use Steam and ditch the whole Games for Windows Live thing. I figured Fuel would be just like this and I'd be able to continue my game later. Well, I was completely wrong. Fuel never abandoned Games for Windows Live, and since the service has been shut down, I can't really play the game anymore. I couldn't load any of my prior saves thanks to the service being shut down. Yeah, it really was that crappy of a service, and it's like, well, shit, I guess there goes my save. I don't really want to start over, so I guess I'm never finishing Fuel, and yeah, to this day, I still have never finished Fuel and don't really plan on it either. I know since then there actually have been some workarounds that allow you to play the game, save, access your saves, etc., but I've changed computers since then. And man, I don't really want to go through all that hassle just to play Fuel again. I'd rather just go buy it on 360 for like $5. But it might be a while before I ever return to the world of Fuel. While there certainly is something here, and there absolutely was some enjoyment to be had, due to the game's rather repetitive nature and me having to start from scratch, I just don't really have much motivation to go back to this one, at least not at this time. So here we have another recent one. We have Mario and Luigi Brothershit. Now this one has gotten a lot of flack really ever since that IGN review came out where they gave it a 6 out of 10, and a lot of people have said that they don't really like this game. But there are actually a number of people that have said that they enjoy the game as well and think that it has a lot to offer. I went into this one with a pretty open mind, but unfortunately I ended up dropping this one, and it's not because I didn't think the game was good. I actually thought the game was quite good in several different areas. It's because the game was just going on and on and on, and it was dragging like crazy, and this seems to be the biggest complaint aimed at this game, and it eventually became a deal breaker for me. I think the battle system's pretty decent. It actually does get rather complex. I think the story's nice. There's some cute characters here. I think the presentation is great, the music is excellent, and it's probably the best Mario & Luigi game since Bowser's Inside Story. However, the game just keeps going, and it has no end in sight. It feels like everything is just incredibly fleshed out and dragged out to almost an annoying degree. The game's pacing is glacial. It feels like it just takes absolutely forever for anything meaningful to happen in the story or for the gameplay to really evolve. When you start the game, the battle system is incredibly basic and it just doesn't have a lot of depth to it. However, at like the 5 or 6 hour mark, they really start introducing some mechanics that give it a bit more depth, but it's like, really? 5 or 6 hours in? Most JRPGs don't take that long. The story, yeah, it feels like it just takes forever for certain things to happen, and it feels like everything in this game is just stretched out as much as possible, like silly putty out here. There just didn't need to be this much game, straight up. I don't think anybody was expecting the new Mario RPG to be 40 or 50 hours long. This game could have easily been half the length of that, and I think it would have just been a better experience. Sure, they might not have been able to go as in-depth with some of these locations, characters, the world, etc., but the pacing would have been a lot better. It would have been introducing new gameplay mechanics at a better rate. The story would have been moving a lot better, and I think it would have just been a lot more enjoyable overall. I got to like the halfway mark, maybe a little past it, and there was just no end in sight, and that was when I just threw my hands up and said, I've played enough of this game, I don't really have much motivation to continue at this point. Now when I was younger, I totally would have played all the way through this. I'm certain I would have beat it, but as I've gotten older, I stopped falling for the sunken cost fallacy. I value my time a lot more. I stopped enjoying the game, even though I think it's good. I just said, I'm done. I've seen enough and I'd rather play other games, other RPGs that really keep me more invested throughout the entire experience. It also came out right around the same time as some other big RPGs like Metaphor, and I'd much rather play through Metaphor than this. Maybe this is another one of those games where I return to it in 6 months to a year from now and it feels fresh again and I'm actually able to finish it, but as of right now, I have zero motivation to return to this one. It really just went on too long, shrimple as that. If you remember what the best Mario and Luigi games are, you know, Superstar Saga, Bowser's Inside Story, shit, even Partners in Time, you'll remember that they were all like 15 to 20 hours long. They shouldn't be double that length, and I think it hurts the overall experience. It certainly did here. Well, from one giant-ass RPG to the next, here we have Octopath Traveler. Now, I've never talked about Octopath Traveler once on the channel, and that's because it's unfortunately one of those games that I gave up on. And I'm sure some people are going to be a bit disappointed to hear that, so let me try to explain. As the title of this video implies, I think the game is pretty good. It was kind of revolutionary when it comes to the world of JRPGs, not just for the incredible, innovative presentation and amazing HD 2D art style, but it really signaled a return of the more classic JRPG renaissance that we're certainly living in nowadays. I think the music was incredible, and I think the battle system is pretty good as well. All of my issues with this game really stem from the story, the characters, and the writing. While there are parts that I like, such as the characters and the individual stories of the characters, when it all comes together and everybody gets together, I just wasn't feeling it at all. The party members rarely, if ever, talk to each other, and it feels so segmented. It all feels so separate from each other. All of the characters' stories don't intertwine in this satisfying, conclusive way like they do in, say, Dragon Quest IV or a number of other JRPGs. It just feels like the characters just kind of come together and they're still doing their own thing, but there's other characters here, and I just didn't really like that. And hey, maybe this one's on me. Maybe way later in the game, the characters really do all come together and have a big centralized plot, and it feels like they're really interacting with each other, like plenty of other JRPGs. I wouldn't know. I didn't see all the way up until the end of the game. Something else that held me back from Octopath Traveler was just how gargantuan this game is, especially if you want to fight the final boss. You're looking at 60, 70 hours, and I just really wasn't feeling engaged enough to put that much time into it. If I'm gonna put that much time into it, I better be really engaged with it. Outside of Assassin's Creed, when I'm putting that much time into it, I really do want to be fully invested in the story, the characters, the world, the gameplay, everything, because that's a lot of time. That's a lot of other games I could have been playing, and for Octopath Traveler 1, it just simply wasn't coming together for me. Maybe the battle system just hadn't clicked with me, maybe the story just wasn't resonating with me the way that it should have. Either way, I stopped with this one, and I don't think I'm going to be coming back to it. I got a good dozen or so hours into it, and maybe this is one that I could have come back to, but my Switch was actually stolen and all my save data was on that Switch, and I don't really want to start over. And a lot of people have told me, try Octopath Traveler 2, it's incredible, it's so much better than the first one. Maybe I will. I think that game might fix some of the issues I had with this one, and maybe I'll be more invested in it. Then I saw how gargantuan the game is, just like the first one, and went, I think I'm going to chill on that one for a little bit. I would genuinely like to get into this series, but at this time, I'm just kind of chilling off it. Maybe if they announce a third one, I'll finally feel motivated to go play the second one, but as things are right now, I'm okay. So here's another that's in my personal hall of shame, and that is Okami. Now, I know how beloved Okami is. I know how many people were really excited that it's getting a sequel all these years later, and I know that there are a lot of people who would say that it's one of the greatest games Capcom has ever put out, and I can absolutely see the game's quality. The presentation is incredible all these years later. There's really never been another game to look like Okami. The music is incredible. The gameplay is actually pretty interesting, but for some reason, I've just never been able to really get into the gameplay. I have tried time and time again to get into Okami. I have picked this game up 3 separate times, and every single time I've ended up dropping it around the 4 to 5 hour mark. I've never gotten past the first few hours of the game, and I just can't really explain why. The first time I bought this game, it was on the Wii, and I remember thinking to myself, man, this is a lot like 3D Zelda. I'm just not really in the mood for 3D Zelda right now, so I ended up dropping it. Then I got it on the PS3. I played an hour or 2 of it and went, I'll come back to this later. It's pretty cool. Never went back to it. And then most recently, I tried it again on Steam and went, this is going to be the time. I'm finally going to go through it. And I ended up dropping it again. About 3 or 4 hours in, I went, I'm enjoying this, but I think I'll play this later. I'll come back to this one. I have tried 3 times now. Am I ever going to actually get through this game? I don't know. Maybe I have to just stream myself playing the entire game at this point. Maybe that will actually motivate me to continue throughout the game. And I just can't exactly pinpoint why I keep dropping it, why I just can't sit down and actually play through the entire game. Is it the story? I think the story's intriguing. I think the world's intriguing. I think the gameplay's actually pretty decent to good. For some reason, I just keep putting this one on the back burner, and I just don't really have a good reason as to why. It's just always, I'll get to it eventually, I'll play it eventually, and I'm gonna be real, at this point, it's been 15 years. I got it on the Wii in 2010. I don't know if I'm ever actually going to get to the game. I very much would like to get to the game. At some point, I'd love to rank like every Capcom game ever. Can't do that if I don't play through this. At this point, I have a feeling, really just a hope, that if I see Okami 2 in action, something stirs up in me and I finally sit my ass down and play through the entire game. I don't really know how else to get motivated for this one. You can tell me all day how good the game is, but for some reason, I keep telling you I'll play it eventually, and eventually still is not here. Well, I knew I couldn't do this list without at least including one more LEGO game. Yeah, LEGO Star Wars 3 is not the only LEGO game that I've quit. I've also quit LEGO Batman 3. Yes, this is a very serious matter. Now, I love LEGO Batman 2. It is one of my favorite LEGO games of all time. I remember I got it when it came out, and I was just blown away with how much they had changed from the other LEGO games. They really changed LEGO games forever with that one. I've 100%ed it. I've played well over 40 hours of it. I love LEGO Batman 2. So when they announced a LEGO Batman 3, I was real excited. I got this game on day one, and I actually ended up being pretty disappointed with it. While I think the story was cool, and it was cool that there were DC characters throughout the entire game rather than just the very end like LEGO Batman 2, it just didn't grab me like the second game did. When it came to the characters, there was also some really odd inclusions here, the weirdest being Daffy Duck as like this joke character, only he ended up being in it just way too much. It would have been one thing if it was just a quick little joke, but Green Lantern showing up a bunch was just kind of a turnoff. Same with Conan O'Brien being here. I just wasn't a fan of this. But what really bummed me out about LEGO Batman 3 more than anything else was the game's approach to the open worlds. I love the open world of LEGO Batman 2. I had so much fun exploring and getting all the gold bricks, and then it was just gone. In LEGO Batman 3, instead it's these lifeless, desolate lantern planets you explore, and I just didn't find this all that engaging, fun, or exciting either. Yeah, I guess I could have just ignored it and played through the main story, but I was just so disappointed with the open areas that I just kind of dropped the entire game. I genuinely loved the Gotham setting of 2, I loved exploring it, I loved the game's vibe and atmosphere, and I had a lot of fun. With LEGO Batman 3, this just wasn't it. And while there were plenty of other things to enjoy about the game, like the suits, the characters, the presentation, etc., but the open world lacking, it just kind of killed the whole thing for me. Maybe I was just really burnt out on LEGO games at the time, especially LEGO Batman in particular. But when I think about this game, all I think about is that disappointing open world, and I just can't really shake that feeling, and I just don't exactly have a lot of motivation to ever return to it. Maybe LEGO DC Supervillains is a lot better. I've only played like an hour of it, so I couldn't really tell you, but it certainly seems like it has a better open world than whatever LEGO Batman 3 had going on. So here's another good game that I ended up quitting, but I'm not going to come out here and say that this is a great game, and that is Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Now this one came out in the early 2010s, and a lot of people thought it was going to be like the next Skyrim or something, the next big open world RPG, and well, it very much was not that. It still had plenty of great elements to it. It would eventually even get a re-release as a Re-Reckoning, and I would check this one out as well, but both times I tried this game, I ended up dropping it. This might sound pretty harsh, but I just had a really hard time getting invested in this game. The world, the characters, and the story, it just seemed rather generic. I just kept asking myself, where's the big hook? When do I get invested? When do I care about these characters of this world? And it just wasn't coming. Where was the reckoning? When do I really give a shit about what's happening around me? And after a number of hours, I finally just said, yeah, this one's not hooking me, at least as far as the story's concerned. When it comes to the gameplay, I thought this was actually a pretty decent action RPG. There was some good elements to this, there was some satisfying enough combat, and I think the combat was actually somewhat enjoyable. Unfortunately, I didn't find the quests or what you were doing in this game outside of the combat to be all the most exciting. It was a little dull, but I also think this might just be a compounding effect from me not really being all that invested in the story, therefore not being all that invested in the quests or what was going on. Still, there's clearly something here with this one. I can't sit here and tell you that the game is bad because I don't think the game is bad. I think it's just lacking in a number of areas. I would say that it's average to maybe slightly above average. Maybe the game gets way better 20 hours in. I didn't find out. I gave up because I said I didn't think that this was all that entertaining and I just didn't really want to put any more time into it. Is that a hot take? You can let me know down below. Maybe one day I'll try this game again if they ever announce a sequel, like that's gonna happen. Maybe I'd feel some more motivation for this one, but as things are in the year 2025, yeah, I don't think I'm going back to Kingdoms of Amalur anytime soon. Alright, so the last game for today is going to be Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm sure this one will make some people frown, but yeah, it's unfortunately a game I've quit. Now, I think the Xenoblade Chronicles series is pretty good. I actually love the first game to death. I love Shulk and his story, and it's easily my favorite of the entire series. I think 3 is pretty cool as well, but that's not what we're talking about today. I remember I got Xenoblade Chronicles 2 when it came out, was very excited for it, and sadly, like so many other games on here, after like a dozen or so hours, I just ended up dropping this one. Like some of the other games I talked about today, I just had a hard time getting invested in the story. I just don't love Rex. I don't think he's the most exciting protagonist, and I wasn't finding his story all that compelling. And then the other characters, like, yeah, they were fine, but it certainly wasn't no Xenoblade Chronicles 1 cast. That cast was incredible. It was amazing. Shulk is one of the best protagonists of any JRPG. This just felt like a step down. Even if I don't compare it to Xenoblade Chronicles 1, I just didn't think it was all that interesting. I think this is one of those games where it really starts to pick up much later in the game, but unfortunately the first dozen or so hours, I just wasn't super engaged. I also thought the pacing was pretty slow in this game, even compared to the first and third one, and I've heard that this is a very, very long game, so it having a very slow pacing certainly wasn't helping things. But another thing that I just didn't love in this game was the battle system. It is different from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It's also a hell of a lot more complicated, and I don't know if that means it's better. The whole system just seems a little convoluted, and it really just clutters up the entire screen. Like during battles, I barely can even tell what's going on. There's just so many things here. Maybe this is simply just a skill issue. I mean, they introduce everything to you at a decent rate, but there was just so much shit going on that I was just like, this feels more like an MMO than anything else. And the first game absolutely had that, and the third game does too, but something about the second game's combat just wasn't really clicking with me. This game in general just didn't really click with me. It just didn't come together. The gears weren't turning. I wasn't smelling what it was cooking. I wasn't picking up what it was putting down. And thanks to all this, after putting a certain amount of time into it, I just said, yeah, I don't think I'm going to continue with this one. This is another one that I would have liked to have picked up sometime in the future, but my Switch was stolen. I lost all my save data. I don't know if I want to start another new game. At this point, I probably just should have anyway, because there's so much shit going on with the battle system and the story that, yeah, you just need a fresh start. But for now, I think I'm okay off Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I think 1 and 3 are quite a bit better. I'd love to try X again since I bounced off that one pretty hard when it was on the Wii U. Maybe someday I'll return to 2, but it certainly might be a while. I'm also going to need a lot of time on my hands, something that isn't very often these days. But alright, that's some games that I gave up on. Those are some games that I quit, and yeah, there were some good ones here, and so I genuinely would love to know what are some games y'all have given up on, what are some games that you quit even though you thought they were good. If you made it to this part of the video, you know what, fuck it, we're doing spicy nuggets again. I'm really in the mood for some spicy nuggets. It's been like a week, I'm fiending, I'm craving them. I'll talk to y'all later, bye bye now.